Maybe you've had a long day. Maybe your mind has been running without pause. Or perhaps you've simply forgotten what it feels like to breathe freely. Tonight, I will bring you into a different kind of journey. Not a journey across lands, but a journey inward, into the quiet corners of your heart, where seasons shift, storms come and go, and a deeper truth waits patiently beneath it all. A truth you may have forgotten, a truth that has been whispering to you for years. You are the sky, not the weather. In the stories ahead, you will walk through valleys where old masters reveal their wisdom. You will sit beside rivers where secrets are carried in the current. You will listen to the hearts of farmers, monks, emperors, and wanderers, each one reflecting a part of you that has been longing to be seen. This is not simply a collection of tales. This is a slow unfolding, a soft unraveling, a gentle remembering. So for a moment, let the world fall away. Sink a little deeper into yourself. Let your breath soften, and allow these stories to guide you back to the calm that has always lived within you. Now, when you're ready, let us begin. Night had already settled across the ancient mountains by the time the first lanterns were lit inside the meditation hall. The air outside was cool enough to make the bamboo groves shiver softly, and the scent of rain lingered as though the clouds had only recently parted. Inside the hall, candles flickered gently along the wooden beams, filling the space with a warm and steady glow. And you, dear listener, arrive in this moment as though guided by the same mountain breeze that carried countless seekers before you. There is nothing to prepare, nothing to accomplish. Simply allow the breath to soften as you enter this sanctuary of quiet stories, each one carrying the same subtle invitation to set down what is heavy and rediscover the peace that has been quietly waiting beneath all you carry. Take a slow breath in and let it fall gently out. Again, with no effort, tonight's journey begins high in the northern mountains, where the winds carve their own poetry across the ridgelines, where monks have lived for centuries in simple temples shaped by sunlight and silence. And within one of these temples lived a teacher whose reputation extended far beyond the icy valleys below. His name was Master Ryanen, a man known not for miracles or impressive displays of mastery, but for a quiet, unwavering honesty in the way he walked, taught, and breathed. The story of the empty seat. Master Ryanen's temple was small, built from cedar wood that had weathered many winters. Its paper doors glowed like pale moons in the early hours, and its floors, polished over generations, reflected the first light of dawn like still water. But the monks who visited the temple always noticed one strange thing. At the main dining table beside the seat reserved for Master Ryanen, there was always an empty chair. The chair was not dusty or forgotten. It was prepared every morning with the same quiet care as every other place. A bowl of steaming rice, a cup of fresh tea, a pair of polished wooden chopsticks. Everything perfectly set. Everything waiting, and yet no one ever sat there. When new monks arrived at the temple, it was always the first thing they whispered about. Maybe it belongs to a traveling sage, some guessed. Or perhaps it is meant for the Buddha himself, others whispered. There were rumors that the master had once lost someone important, a companion, a teacher, a beloved friend, and that he kept the seat as a memorial, but no one dared to ask him directly. There was a quiet depth surrounding the old master that made each monk feel that the empty seat was not something to investigate lightly. Among the new arrivals that year was a young monk named Haruto. He was bright, deeply sincere, and full of questions that filled him with both curiosity and restlessness. At his previous monastery, rules were recited with precision, and every symbol had a clearly defined meaning. But here, this one empty chair was like a riddle that refused to leave him alone. For his first week at the temple, Haruto tried to ignore his curiosity. For the second, he tried to distract himself with chores. By the third week, the question had become so persistent that he barely slept at all. Every morning when he saw the bowl of steaming rice untouched, something inside him tightened. Something in the untouched tea bothered him. Why prepare something every day if no one was meant to receive it? Finally, after 21 days of silent struggle, Haruto gathered his courage. One evening, after the monks had finished dinner and dispersed to their evening practices, Master Ryonen stepped outside to watch the last light fade behind the mountains. Haruto followed him, bowing deeply. "Master," he said softly, "forgive my question." Ryonen said nothing, but his eyes twinkled as though he had been expecting this. Haruto continued, though his voice trembled slightly. "Every morning an empty chair is prepared beside you, a place carefully set yet untouched. May I ask, for whom is this seat?" The master did not answer immediately. He lowered himself onto a wooden bench and motioned for Haruto to sit beside him. The wind rustled through the pines. Far below, a river could be heard whispering its endless song. After a long silence, Ryonen finally said, "That chair is for the part of me I have not yet let go." Haruto blinked. "I don't understand." Ryonen smiled gently. "Each dawn I rise believing I have released my ego. I believe I am free from the need to be someone important. I believe I have outgrown the desire to appear wise or special. And yet," he held up one weathered hand, "each day I discover some new attachment hiding beneath the old ones, a subtle pride, a quiet clinging, a small pleasure in being respected." Haruto stared at him astonished. "You, master, you still struggle with ego." Ryonen laughed, a soft, warm sound like water flowing over smooth stones. "My boy, even the belief that I am humble is itself a kind of pride." He looked toward the empty seat through the open doorway of the hall. "That chair is a reminder. Every day I sit beside the self I have not yet released." Haruto felt the world shift inside him, like the first moment of awakening from a dream. He had believed enlightenment meant reaching a final plateau where all inner conflicts vanished. But now, here was a master openly admitting that self-clinging continued even after decades of practice. Master Ryonen placed his hand on Haruto's shoulder. "The path of letting go is endless," he said. "There is always another layer, another cushion to lift, another story to release." That night, Haruto lay awake not with questions, but with an unfamiliar quietness inside him. The empty chair no longer troubled him, instead it comforted him. He realized that he too had many invisible chairs, places inside him filled with unexamined desires, expectations, and fears he had not yet released. And for the first time in many weeks, Haruto fell asleep easily, with a softness in his breath he had never felt before. The lesson of the unseen burdens. Over the next months, Haruto began to observe himself more honestly than ever. He noticed when he wanted others to think he meditated well. He noticed when he felt proud of completing chores perfectly. He noticed when he compared his progress to others. He noticed when he felt superior or inferior. He noticed the small tremors of ego everywhere, some loud, some whisper soft. Each time he discovered one, he would breathe, smile, and imagine placing it gently on the empty chair beside Master Ryanen's. Not to judge it, not to erase it, simply to acknowledge it. And in doing so, he found release, because you cannot let go of what you refuse to see. But the moment you turn toward something with honesty, the moment you illuminate it with awareness, it loosens, melts, softens, just like the morning frost dissolving under the first touch of sunlight. Expanding the teaching, new voices from the valley, 30% new creative extension. As seasons changed and word of the empty seat teaching spread across the valley, travelers and monks began visiting Master Ryonen for guidance. Many brought their own burdens, fears, expectations, ambitions concealed beneath polite smiles. One such visitor was Lady Ayame, a noblewoman weighed down by grief. Another was Kenzo, a merchant whose success had slowly become a cage. There was also Suta, a wandering poet whose loneliness followed him like a shadow. Each one had an invisible cushion of their own. Renan listened to their stories with the same gentle attention he offered to Haruto. He never rushed to give advice. Instead, he would pour tea slowly, letting the steam rise between them like a thin veil of quiet understanding. To Lady Ayame he said, "Your grief does not need to be healed today. Place it beside you, give it a seat, let it rest." To Kenzo he said, "The weight you carry comes not from possessions but from the stories you tell yourself about them. Set one story down each morning." To Suta he said, "Loneliness grows heavy only when you resist it. Let it sit beside you like a guest. It might reveal its purpose." Over time, each traveler discovered a form of inner spaciousness they had long forgotten, not because their problems vanished, but because they stopped clinging to them so tightly. The empty seat became a symbol not only of ego, but of all the things human beings hold unnecessarily: regrets, expectations, anxiety about the future, shame about the past, the exhausting performance of trying to appear strong. By giving these burdens a place beside them rather than inside them, they found themselves lighter, freer, at peace. Returning to you, the listener, as you hear this story, perhaps there is an empty seat within you as well. A space where something you've been carrying can finally be set down. What might you place there tonight? A fear you've outgrown but still hold. A regret you revisit again and again. A pressure you never agreed to carry. Or simply the tiredness of a long season of striving. Whatever it is, let it rest beside you now. There is no judgment here, only space, only breath, only the quiet reminder that you do not need to carry everything inside your heart. Take one slow breath and release. Tonight's story is only the beginning. In the next chapters, we will journey through mountains, rivers, and quiet valleys, each one reflecting a different part of your inner landscape. But for now, rest in the soft truth that Master Ryanin revealed. Peace is not something you achieve. It is what remains when you stop holding so tightly. Let the breath soften. Let the body relax. Let the empty seat within you welcome whatever needs to rest. You are safe here, and this night is long enough for every burden to find its quiet place. The night deepened across the mountain temple, stretching its dark velvet sky over pines and distant valley lights. Inside the meditation hall, silence became its own kind of warmth, a steady living presence, like a great invisible hand resting gently over everything. You, dear listener, remain here with us in this unfolding journey, following the quiet thread woven from Master Ryanin's empty seat. But the night is long, and our path continues. If you settle more deeply now, feeling the body soften, the breath become quieter, you may hear the whisper of another story rising out of the mountain winds. A story that begins not in a temple but far below, in the bustling heart of a prosperous valley town. And in that town lived a man whose life seemed full in every visible way, yet unbearably heavy in all the ways that mattered most. The story of Daigo, the merchant of shadows. Daigo was known throughout the valley as a man of remarkable wealth. He owned 2 warehouses, 3 shops, and a collection of rare imported goods that made other merchants whisper with envy. Silk from distant kingdoms, perfumes carried across deserts, carved jade figures, and delicate porcelain bowls so fine they rang like bells when touched. People believed he was blessed with fortune. Children watched him pass in his embroidered robes and imagined he must be the happiest man alive. But if they had looked closely, truly closely, they would have seen something the silk could not conceal. A heaviness. An invisible weight pressing into his shoulders, tightening his jaw, dimming the brightness that wealth should have sparked in his eyes. For Daigo was a man who did not own his possessions. His possessions owned him. Each coin brought new fear of theft. Each rare object brought new worry of loss. Each success bound him tighter to the expectations of others. At night, sleep refused him. His mind raced with shadows, calculations, anxieties, plans layered upon plans. Sometimes he woke imagining he had heard burglars only to find the house silent. Sometimes he bolted upright, convinced that a competitor was undercutting him. Even when he attended festivals or gatherings, a part of him remained tethered to his warehouses, imagining the worst. One evening, after a particularly restless day of haggling, Daigo walked to the riverbank that ran along the outskirts of town. The sun was setting, streaking gold across the water and painting the world in a beauty he barely noticed. His hands trembled from the tension he had carried all day. A group of children splashed nearby, laughing without restraint. Daigo looked at them with a faint sense of envy. How simple their lives seemed, how unburdened, how free. He whispered to himself, "I carry too much, but if I release it, what will remain of me?" This question clung to him long after he left the river. A chance encounter. The next morning, as Daigo walked through the bustling market, he overheard two travelers speaking in hushed tones beside a spice stall. "Have you heard of the river hermit?" one whispered. "He lives by the bend where the water widens. They say he owns nothing, yet sleeps like a child." "Impossible," the other scoffed. "A man with no possessions has only misery." But the first insisted, "No. They say he is content, truly content." Daigo walked past them, but the conversation clung to him like burrs on cloth. A man who owned nothing? Content? How could that be? If he owned nothing, would fear not devour him? Yet Daigo, who owned much, felt devoured already. For days the thought gnawed at him. At last, unable to bear the curiosity, or perhaps the hope, he set out for the river bend, meeting the hermit. The journey was short, but Daigo walked slowly, weighed down by indecision. What would he even say to this hermit? When he reached the river bend, he saw a small hut made from driftwood, reed mats, and sun-baked mud. Smoke drifted lazily from a tiny clay chimney. Outside, a man in simple robes sat with his feet in the water, humming as he watched the current swirl around his ankles. His hair was long and tied with a piece of grass. His face was lined but peaceful. Peaceful in a way Daigo had never seen in himself. Daigo cleared his throat, unsure of himself. "Are you the hermit who lives here?" The man turned, smiled, and nodded. "I am Sogen," he said, "and you are carrying something heavy." Daigo stiffened. "I've brought nothing with me." Sogen pointed gently toward the merchant's chest. "Not in your hands, in here." Daigo felt strangely exposed, as though the hermit could see the restless flurry of thoughts behind his eyes. Sogen patted the ground beside him. "Sit. The river is generous. It always has time for the burdens we no longer wish to carry." Reluctantly, Daigo sat. For a while, they said nothing. The river moved. Birds sang. Wind whispered through the reeds. Daigo's shoulders slowly loosened, as though years of tension were unwinding one breath at a time. The burden revealed. After a long silence, Sogen asked softly, "What troubles you?" Daigo hesitated, then exhaled shakily. "I have everything," he said slowly, "and yet I feel crushed beneath it. I fear loss every moment. Even now I am thinking of my warehouses, of thieves, of misfortune." His voice cracked. "I cannot rest, I cannot breathe. My possessions follow me like shadows that lengthen every year." Sogen nodded patiently. "Then your suffering is simple." Daigo frowned. "Simple? I feel as though I'm drowning." "Yes," Sogen said, "but drowning is simple. You are submerged because you refuse to release what drags you under." He reached down and lifted a smooth river stone. "Here, hold this." Daigo took it. "Now imagine this stone is your wealth, your status, your reputation." He placed another stone in Daigo's hands. "And this is your fear of losing them." Then a third. "And this is your desire to hold them even tighter." Daigo's arms trembled slightly under the weight. "Now," Sogen said quietly, "try to lift them higher." Daigo struggled. The stones grew heavier with every movement. "Again," Sogen said. Daigo tried. And the stones slipped from his grasp, tumbling into the river with a soft splash. Sogen smiled. "You see, even stones become impossible to carry forever." Daigo stared at his empty hands, hands that felt strangely light. Something inside him loosened in a way that frightened him. "Letting go is not loss," Sogen said. "Letting go is learning to breathe again. A simple meal, a quiet realization." Sogen invited Daigo to share a meal. It consisted of nothing more than boiled greens and a handful of wild mushrooms, no spices, no delicacies. Yet the flavors were gentle and comforting, and Daigo felt himself chewing slowly, truly tasting each bite instead of rushing through it in his usual habit. After the meal, Sogen poured a cup of tea into a chipped clay cup. "This cup," Sogen said, "one was broken twice. I repaired it each time. It is imperfect, but holds tea perfectly." Daigo touched the uneven rim. "In your world," Sogen continued, "you would discard such a cup. Replace it with something flawless, delicate, new. But I find joy in the imperfections. They remind me that usefulness is not diminished by flaws and peace is not diminished by lack." He placed the cup into Daigo's hands. "Nothing can be added to this tea to make it more complete. Nothing can be taken from it to make it more pure. It is simply tea." Daigo stared into the cup. The simplicity struck him with surprising force. He whispered, "And I am not simple." Sogen shook his head gently. "You are simple. Underneath everything you cling to, you are simple. You were simple once, as a child, and you will be simple again when you stop gripping life with such desperate fingers." Daigo's eyes stung. "I don't know how to let go," he whispered. Sogen smiled softly. "Then let go of not knowing." The path back to lightness, 30% creative extension. Daigo returned to the town that evening with a feeling he could not name. The air smelled different. Colors appeared sharper. He passed a vendor selling lanterns and paused, noticing the warm glow spilling from each paper enclosure. He had walked by lanterns 1,000 times but had never truly seen them. At home, instead of reviewing his ledgers, he sat quietly by the window watching the moonrise. He placed his ring, a heavy thing set with a ruby, onto the table. For years he had worn it as a symbol of his status. Tonight it looked like nothing more than a small piece of metal. Over the next weeks, Daigo made small, almost invisible changes. He gave away one of his shops to a distant cousin who had always dreamed of running his own business. He donated crates of unused goods to families in need. He stopped negotiating each deal with ruthless precision, and instead began asking himself, "How much is enough?" He noticed something else. The more he released, the more he slept, deeply, peacefully. The shadows in his mind grew faint. One morning, when sunlight spilled through his window, Daigo sat up with a startling realization. The fear, the anxiety, the constant calculating had disappeared, not overnight, not through force, but like mist dissolving under gentle warmth. The river returns what you give. Months later, Daigo traveled again to Sogen's hut. This time he carried nothing except a small bundle of tea leaves. Sogen welcomed him with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "What have you set down since I last saw you?" he asked. Daigo thought for a moment. "My fear," he said, "my pride, my constant need for more. And what has returned to you?" Daigo looked at the river, watching the sunlight ripple across its surface. "Our freedom," he said, "sleep, breath, joy in small things." Sogen nodded. "The river always returns what you give, but in a different form." Daigo sat beside him and let his feet slip into the cold water. For the first time in his life, he felt weightless. A teaching for you. As you listen to Daigo's story, perhaps there is something in your own life that has grown heavy. Something you've carried not because it nourishes you, but because you fear what life might be without it. We all have such shadows, a responsibility we've overstretched ourselves to meet, a fear of disappointing others, a habit of perfectionism, a belief that rest must be earned, a pressure to constantly improve, achieve, succeed. In the quiet of this moment, you don't need to set anything down permanently. You don't need to decide anything. Simply ask yourself, what am I holding tightly that I might loosen just a little tonight? The breath may answer before the mind does. A soft inhale, a long exhale. Letting go gently, not all at once, not forever. Just enough to feel the difference. Just enough to feel the space between you and the burden. Just enough to remember what Daigo learned. You were not meant to live weighed down. You were meant to move through life with open hands. The river inside you is still flowing, always ready to receive whatever you choose to release. Even the smallest stone lightens the journey. And tonight, as your breath softens, as your body relaxes further into rest, You may find that the burdens you carried into this story feel more distant now, as though the current has begun to carry them away. You do not need to force this. As Sogan said, let go of not knowing how. Let the letting go happen on its own. Rest here a moment. Feel the invitation of lightness, and when you're ready, we will continue our journey to the next valley, the next teaching, the next piece of your inner landscape waiting to be discovered. The night was deep when the story of Daigo's release faded gently into silence. Outside the mountain temple, clouds drifted across the moon in slow, unhurried waves, like thoughts passing through a mind finally ready to rest. The bamboo whispered softly. The lanterns flickered with a calm, steady warmth. And in the heart of the meditation hall, you remained here with us, allowing the breath to soften and the body to settle more deeply into stillness. But our journey through the first chapter has one more path to follow. One more teaching unfolding like a lotus in the dark. For not far from Master Rionen's mountain temple, across valleys of pine and rivers of silver-blue water, stood another monastery. It was a place where the winters were long and harsh, and where the cold carved its wisdom into the very stone. There, a young monk named Renji struggled fiercely, not with the world outside, but with the world within. Renji, the monk who tried too hard. Renji had arrived at the monastery 2 years earlier, full of determination and fire. He was brilliant, disciplined, and impossibly hard on himself. Where others moved with gentle persistence, Renji drove himself with relentless intensity. He meditated longer than anyone else. He sat through pain that made even senior monks wince. He memorized scriptures late into the night. He rose before dawn to practice breath control in the freezing air. He wanted enlightenment. He wanted stillness. He wanted freedom from thought, from desire, from all the turbulence he believed would vanish if he simply pushed hard enough. And yet, the harder he pushed, the further peace slipped from his grasp. His mind was loud. His breath was strained. Every meditation became a battlefield against himself. At night he tossed and turned, unable to settle. During the day, his frustration built like storm clouds. He envied the ease with which other monks seemed to reach calm states during practice. "How?" he muttered under his breath one morning. "How do they quiet the mind? What technique do they use? What am I missing?" He believed enlightenment was like a locked door, and that if he pushed with enough force, it would eventually burst open. He did not yet understand that some doors open only when you stop pressing against them. A winter of exhaustion. Winter came early that year. Snow fell heavy across the courtyard, blanketing everything in white. The meditation hall became cold enough that each breath formed a small cloud of vapor. The wooden floors stung even through thick socks. Icicles hung from the eaves like sharp, glittering teeth. Renji took this as a sign to practice even more intensely. "If I can meditate through this cold," he told himself, "I can overcome anything." He forced himself to sit for hours in the frigid hall until his legs went numb and his back burned with tension. He clenched his jaw, trying to stop thoughts from arising. He battled each wandering impulse as though fighting an enemy in the dark. But the more he fought, the stronger his thoughts seemed to grow. It felt as if his mind mocked him, scattering images, memories, desires, worries, and questions across his awareness in defiance of every technique he tried. One evening, after nearly collapsing from exhaustion, Renji approached the abbot, Master Hakuin, a man whose age seemed impossible. His hair was white as frost, his back bent like an ancient willow. But his eyes held the shimmering clarity of a winter sky, vast, bright, and utterly unclouded. Renji bowed deeply. "Master," he said, voice trembling with both desperation and shame, "I have worked harder than anyone, but my mind will not grow still. The more I try to silence it, the louder it becomes. What am I doing wrong? How can I meditate properly? How can I force my mind into peace?" Master Hakuin studied him for a long moment, so long that Renji wondered if the old man had fallen asleep with his eyes open. Finally, Hakuin stood slowly, leaning heavily on his wooden staff. "Follow me," he said. The frozen basin, Master Hakuin led Renji out into the courtyard. Snowflakes swirled in the wind like tiny white lanterns. The cold air bit into their skin, but the master seemed unaffected. At the center of the courtyard stood an old stone basin carved centuries earlier by monks long forgotten. It was filled with water from the well, but the surface had frozen into a thick layer of ice. Moonlight reflected off its surface like a sheet of polished glass. "Renji," the master said, "I want you to melt this ice." Renji blinked. "With what tools?" "Your hands." Renji hesitated. "But that will take hours if it's even possible." "Try," the master said, stepping back. Renji knelt beside the basin and pressed his palms onto the ice. A shock of cold shot up his arms, but he gritted his teeth and began rubbing vigorously, trying to generate warmth. His skin reddened, then numbed, then burned. He rubbed harder and harder. His breath quickened, his shoulders tensed, his jaw clenched. But the ice remained unchanged. After several minutes, he gasped and pulled his hands back, trembling violently. "It's useless," he said, voice cracking. "It won't melt, no matter how hard I try." Master Hakuin nodded calmly. "Now," he said, "step back and watch." Renji obeyed, rubbing his frozen hands together. The abbot stood silently beside him, and together they watched as the early morning sun began to rise over the mountains. Even in winter, its light carried a soft warmth. Golden rays reached across the courtyard and touched the stone basin. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, gently, tiny droplets of water formed on the ice. The sun did not strain. The sun did not struggle. The sun did not fight the ice. It simply shone, and the ice responded. It surrendered without resistance. It melted not because of force, but because it was held in warmth. Renji felt something inside him loosen like a knot untied by invisible hands. Master Hakuin turned to him. "Do you see, Renji? The sun does not melt the ice through effort. It melts the ice through being what it naturally is." Renji swallowed hard. You mean I don't need to force the mind?" The master nodded. Peace does not come from effort. Effort comes from ego. Peace comes from allowing. What allowing really means. They walked slowly back toward the meditation hall, the snow crunching beneath their feet. "Oh, sit with me," Hakuin said, lowering himself onto a wooden bench. Renji sat, still trembling from the cold, and from the realization beginning to take shape within him. The master continued, "Your mind is like this winter ice. Your effort is like your hands. The harder you rub, the more numb you become and the less you accomplish." Renji stared at the snow. "But what if my thoughts are chaotic? What if I can't stop them?" Hakuin smiled. "Why would you need to stop them?" Renji blinked. "Because thoughts disturb meditation." "Do they?" Hakuin asked. "Or is it your resistance to them that disturbs meditation?" Renji opened his mouth, then closed it. Hakuin continued, "When a thought arises, let it arise. When it fades, let it fade. When the mind races, let it race. When it slows, let it slow." He gestured toward the snow-covered mountains. "The world does not become peaceful because you command it to. It becomes peaceful when you stop demanding it to change." He tapped Renji's chest lightly. "Let your awareness be like the sun, natural, gentle, unforced, shining by its own nature." The young monk felt tears prick his eyes, tears of exhaustion, relief, and gratitude. "Master, I've been trying to force enlightenment. And in doing so," Hakuin said softly, "you have chased it away." The first gentle sitting. That evening, instead of bracing himself for battle as he usually did, Renji sat on his meditation cushion with a kind of quiet curiosity. He did not straighten his back with rigid determination. He did not clench his jaw. He did not try to empty his mind. He simply breathed and allowed. Thoughts came. He allowed them. Memories surfaced. He allowed them. Restlessness swirled. He allowed it. At one point, he smiled softly, not because something profound happened, but because nothing profound needed to happen. For the first time in months, Renji felt a gentle warmth spreading through his chest, as though something inside him had finally stopped resisting. It wasn't enlightenment. It wasn't perfection. It wasn't peace in the dramatic sense he had sought. But it was ease. It was softness. It was enough. The unexpected breakthrough, 30% creative expansion. Over the next weeks, Renji practiced allowing instead of forcing. And something remarkable happened. The mind, given permission to move freely, grew quieter on its own. His breath deepened naturally. His posture softened into something fluid and effortless. His heart unclenched. His thoughts lost their sharpness, settling like snowflakes on a still pond. One morning, during a routine sitting meditation, Renji suddenly felt something shift. Not dramatically, not explosively, but subtly, like a door opening silently in a dark room. The sense of being Renji, the struggler, the seeker, the one who must succeed, simply dissolved. There was no watcher, no thinker, no identity to defend. Only awareness, pure, quiet, boundless. It lasted just a few heartbeats, but it was enough. When he later described it to Master Hakuin, the abbot nodded knowingly. "You stopped trying to melt the ice," Hakuin said. "You simply allowed the sun to shine. A message for you. Now, dear listener, let Renji's discovery rest gently within you. Perhaps there is something you have been trying very hard to control. Your thoughts, your emotions, your sleep, your habits, your heart, your future. Effort has its place, but there are realms of the human spirit that refuse to open under pressure. Peace is one of them. Sleep is another. The mind grows louder the more you demand it to be quiet. The body grows tense the more you insist it must relax. But when you stop forcing, when you stop gripping the mind like something to be controlled, softness arrives. Just as winter ice melts under sunlight, your inner tension melts under awareness without effort. So as you settle deeper into this night, allow the breath to move naturally. Allow the thoughts to drift without resistance. Allow the body to sink into the support beneath it. You are not here to achieve anything. You are not here to silence the mind. You are not here to force stillness. You are here to allow. That is enough. Breathe softly. Let the warmth of your own awareness spread gently like sunlight over frozen water. Let everything melt in its own time. And when you are ready, we will step quietly into Chapter 2, where new stories wait. Each one a reflection of the peace already blossoming within you. The moon had climbed high above the mountain temple by the time Renji's revelation settled into silence. Outside, a faint mist drifted upward from the forest, curling like silver breath around the pine trunks. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. A single low note that lingered in the cool air. Inside the quiet hall where you now rest, the stories of Chapter 1 have already sunk deeper into your awareness. Not as ideas to be analyzed, but as gentle seeds, waiting in their own quiet timing to take root. And tonight, as your breath softens, we begin the next chapter of this long journey. A chapter that turns our attention from the inner struggle against effort to the deeper truth that growth is slow, hidden, and profoundly intelligent. This chapter begins not in a temple, nor beside a river, but in a wide valley where fields ripple like green silk beneath the morning sun. In that valley lived a farmer named Hiroto, a man whose life would become a teaching for generations. The farmer who could not wait. Hiroto had inherited his land from his father, just as his father had inherited it before him. The soil was dark and rich, fed by centuries of mountain rain. If you walked across it barefoot, it felt cool and alive beneath your soles. Hiroto's ancestors had grown rice, barley, and vegetables here, and had always treated the land with quiet reverence. But Hiroto was different from them in one way. He was impatient, not outwardly, not rudely, but in the quiet way that gnaws at a person's peace. The kind of impatience that hides beneath restlessness, beneath worry, beneath the constant whisper, "You should be further along by now." Hiroto woke each morning before dawn, not with calm diligence but with urgency, as if the ground might betray him unless he monitored it constantly. When he planted rice, he woke 3 times per night to check water levels. When he planted vegetables, he measured each sprout against a wooden stick every morning. When he sowed barley, he dug into the soil every few days to check on the seeds. Something his father had warned him never to do. "You disturb what is becoming," his father used to say. "Roots grow in darkness, leave them be." But Hiroto could never leave things be. He needed progress, he needed evidence, He needed reassurance, and reassurance rarely came fast enough. The year of growing fear. One spring, something unusual happened. Hiroto planted his rice seedlings as he always did. But after 2 weeks, they seemed to barely grow. Their small green blades trembled in the wind, no taller than his thumb. Other farmers' seedlings looked similar, but Hiroto saw only danger in the slowness. What if the soil is losing its strength? What if pests are attacking the roots? What if this will be the season that destroys my family? His fear became a constant visitor, sitting beside him at mealtimes, following him across the fields, whispering into his dreams at night. Driven by anxiety, Hiroto took action. He watered the fields twice as much. He added fertilizer earlier than recommended. He loosened the soil around the sprouts to help the roots breathe. He dug up 1 or 2 seedlings, sometimes more, to inspect their development. What he saw alarmed him. The roots were short, pale, delicate. He panicked, and so he interfered even more. Each day became a cycle of fear and overcorrection. And each day the sprouts weakened further. The elder Tanzan. In the neighboring field worked an elderly farmer named Tanzan, whose back was bent like an old willow tree. He had seen 60 harvests. His movements were slow but precise, like someone dancing to a rhythm older than his own heartbeat. He often watched Hiroto with quiet concern. One morning, after seeing Hiroto dig up another handful of seedlings, Tanzan left his field and approached him. "Hiroto," he said gently, "do you know what you are doing?" "I'm trying to understand what's wrong," Hiroto replied, hands trembling slightly. "These plants are not growing. Something must be wrong beneath the soil." Tanzan knelt beside him. "And so you keep interrupting them?" Hiroto bristled. "I'm checking their progress. And would you check the progress of a child by cutting him open each day to see if his heart grows?" Hiroto froze. Tanzan continued. "The roots that trouble you do not lack strength. They lack time. Everything below the surface grows slowly, quietly, invisibly. Your impatience is harming what would thrive if undisturbed." Hiroto's face reddened. "But what if they're failing?" he said. "What if I lose the harvest?" Tanzan looked at him with a softness that carried decades of understanding. "My worry does not help seeds grow, Hiroto. Fear does not deepen roots, and effort," he picked up one of the uprooted seedlings, "does not replace patience." He placed the fragile plant back into the mud. "Growth is not your command to give," Tanzan whispered. "It is the earth's." The teaching of the bamboo grove, 70% original concept, 30% expansion. Seeing Hiroto's confusion, Tanzan motioned for him to follow. They walked to the edge of the valley where a bamboo grove rose tall and quiet, leaves rustling like soft applause in the wind. The stalks stood 20, 30 feet high, straight, elegant, impossible to sway. Tanzan placed his hand on one of them. "This bamboo is admired by all who see it," he said, "but few know its story." Hiroto waited, and for the first 5 years after bamboo is planted, almost nothing happens, at least above the ground. It may grow only an inch or 2. Some farmers become worried and stop tending it. Others dig it up thinking it is dead. But during those years of stillness, something extraordinary is happening beneath the soil. The roots spread, deepen, strengthen. If you looked only at the surface, you would think it is failing. But in truth, it is preparing. He let the truth sink in. "And then," Tanzan continued, "in its 5th or 6th year, the bamboo shoots up 3 feet in a day, sometimes more." Hiroto stared at the towering bamboo, suddenly overwhelmed by the truth standing in front of him. "So I've been expecting bamboo growth from rice seedlings," he murmured. Tanzan smiled. "You have been expecting visible results before invisible foundations have formed. The slow miracle." Over the next week, Hiroto stopped digging up his seedlings. He watered gently, removed weeds, and adjusted water levels with care. But he did not interfere compulsively. His hands still trembled sometimes. His mind still spiraled into worry. But each time fear arose, he reminded himself of Tanzan's words. "Growth is not your command." He began waking before dawn, not out of urgency, but to walk the fields in silence, to breathe the morning air, to trust the soil. Something in him softened. On the 10th morning, the seedlings looked slightly taller. Not dramatically, just a little. But this time, Hiroto did not rush to measure them. He simply smiled. Days passed. The sun warmed the valley. Rain fell in gentle rhythms. The rice seedlings grew stronger, their green blades shimmering with morning dew. By midsummer, Hiroto's fields were bright and lush. He felt something inside him growing too. Not speed, not productivity, but patience. The quiet miracle he could not force. The drought that put patience to the test. 30% new creative content. Just when Hiroto believed he had finally learned the lesson, nature offered a deeper challenge. A drought swept through the valley. Rivers thinned. Wells dropped. The soil hardened beneath the sun's relentless glare. Fear returned quickly. Sharp, familiar, suffocating. But as Hiroto rushed outside to check his fields, he noticed Tanzen standing calmly in his own field, carrying a small bucket of stored water. Tanzen nodded toward Hiroto. "Walk with me." Together they inspected both their fields. Some sprouts drooped in the heat. Some leaves were yellowing. Hiroto swallowed hard. "What if they die?" Tanzen set down the bucket. "Then they die. The season decides as much as we do. But shouldn't we do something? We should do what helps, not what harms. We should respond, not panic." He scooped a modest amount of water onto the soil near the roots. Not too much, not too little. Listen, Hiroto, in drought, the roots grow deeper in search of water. Hardship can strengthen what ease cannot, but only if you do not disrupt the process with fear. The younger farmer felt a tremor of understanding. This was not a lesson about farming. It was a lesson about life. When relationships struggle, we dig too quickly for certainty. When our careers slow, we panic and overcompensate. When healing takes longer than expected, we force ourselves to recover. We disturb the roots, but nature teaches otherwise. Growth deepens in difficulty, not under constant inspection. The return of the rains. The drought lasted 10 more days. On the 11th, the sky finally broke open. Rain fell in sheets, soaking the fields, filling the riverbanks, and cooling the thirsty earth with a sound like endless applause. Hiroto stood barefoot in the wet soil, arms open, letting the rain drench him completely. Not out of relief alone, but out of recognition. Nature had reminded him once again, nothing grows on your schedule. Everything grows in its own time. He looked to Tanzen's field. The elder smiled back from across the rain-soaked valley. Both fields survived the drought. Both harvests later flourished. But something deeper had changed. Hiroto no longer measured the value of a season by its yield alone. He measured it by how deeply he himself had grown. A teaching for you, the listener. Now, dear traveler of this quiet night, as your breath slows, as your body softens into the stillness surrounding you, consider Hiroto's lesson. There are parts of your life that are developing right now beneath the surface, even if you cannot see the signs yet. The healing you seek, the confidence you long for, the inner peace you yearn to reclaim, the direction you are waiting to discover. Some of these cannot be rushed. Some must grow roots before they grow upward. Some must deepen unseen before they can rise into form. You may feel stuck, but your roots may be strengthening. You may feel behind, but timing may be aligning. You may feel absent of progress, but the foundation may be forming quietly in the dark. Just as bamboo spends years preparing beneath the earth, your becoming unfolds in ways you cannot witness directly. So tonight, stop digging up the seeds, stop checking the roots, stop assuming slow means failing. Instead, allow, trust, rest. Growth is happening inside you in ways you may not yet understand. And like the bamboo waiting for its season to rise, you are preparing for a moment when everything will unfold with a sudden, breathtaking clarity. Let your breath soften one more time. Feel the gentle miracle within you, quiet, patient, alive. When you are ready, we will continue into Chapter 2, Part 2, where the story deepens into the mystery of seeking and finding what was always already here. The valley had grown quiet after the rains, and Hiroto's fields shimmered under a soft blanket of early morning mist. But as our story unfolds tonight, the scene slowly shifts, lifting us gently from the quiet farms and bamboo groves carrying us upward through mountain passes, across rivers, and finally into a great kingdom that flourished far beyond those peaceful fields. And within that kingdom lived a ruler whose life was the opposite of Hiroto's simple patience. He was a man who had everything, and yet felt an emptiness that nothing seemed able to fill. His name was Emperor Akamori, beloved by his people, admired by neighboring rulers, and surrounded by wealth enough to outlast several lifetimes. And yet, in the quiet hours of night, when even the palace lanterns had dimmed, the emperor would sit alone in the moon chamber, a room filled with windows that reflected the stars, but brought him no peace. For despite all he possessed, Akami felt a deep and persistent longing for something he could not name. The emperor who sought the meaning of everything. Akamori had studied every sacred text available. He had summoned philosophers from distant lands. He had questioned scholars, priests, mystics, monks, and hermits. But the more answers he gathered, the less satisfied he became. Some would say, "Your Majesty, enlightenment lies in virtue." Others whispered, "Contentment is found in knowledge." Still others proclaimed, "Unhappiness waits beyond desire." Akamori listened. He recorded their teachings. He practiced their rituals. And yet, the inner restlessness remained. Each night, as palace musicians played soft melodies, the emperor would feel as though something essential was slipping just beyond his reach. Like a dream dissolving the moment he tried to hold it. He didn't want more wealth. He didn't want more power. He didn't want glory or fame. What he wanted was clarity, a simple understanding. A truth that would free him from the constant whisper, "Something is missing." The arrival of the uninvited visitor. One evening, a quiet knock came at the palace gates. The guards opened them to find an elderly traveler wearing robes faded by sun and wind. He carried nothing but a small cloth bag and a walking staff carved with strange symbols. "I wish to speak with the emperor," he said calmly. The guards laughed openly. "No one speaks with the emperor without summons," one sneered. But the old traveler only bowed. "That may be so," he said, "but the emperor is asking questions only I can answer." Something about the man's tone, gentle yet certain, uneased the guards. So they escorted him inside reluctantly. Moments later, the traveler stood in the moon chamber, bowing before Emperor Akamori. "You requested audience?" the emperor asked. "No," the traveler replied simply. "You did." The emperor frowned. "I summoned no one." "You have summoned every teacher in the land," the old man said, "and yet none have brought you peace, so I have come." Akamori studied him closely. There was no arrogance in the traveler's voice, no theatrics. Only clarity, steady, calm, unshakable. Akamori gestured to the cushions. "Sit, then," he said. "If you truly have something to offer, speak." The gift of the empty vessel. The traveler lowered himself onto the cushion beside the emperor. From his small cloth bag he withdrew a wooden box, a simple thing made from pine tied shut with rough rope. Without ceremony he placed it in the emperor's hands. "In this container holds the truth you seek," he said. Akamori's heart quickened. "At last," he murmured. "A teaching I can understand directly, a truth I can possess." The traveler shook his head. "You cannot possess truth, Your Majesty. You can only recognize it." Akamori looked down at the box. "And what must I do?" he asked. The traveler spoke softly, but his voice carried the weight of mountains. "Open it only when you are ready." "Ready?" Akamori repeated. "Ready for what?" For the truth," the traveler said simply. "That will end your searching." The emperor frowned, confused. But when he looked up, the old man had vanished. No guards had seen him leave. No footsteps echoed in the hallway. No door had opened. Akamori stood alone, holding the mysterious container. Years of waiting. The emperor placed the box on a pedestal beside his bed. Each night he stared at it, tempted to open it. Each morning he reached for it, only to stop short. "Not yet," he whispered. "I am not ready." But what did readiness mean? Time passed. Seasons changed. Wars came and went. New alliances formed. Children were born. Ministers grew old and retired. But the box remained closed. Akamori lived through years of triumph and sorrow. He held dying friends in his arms. He saw his children become adults. He grew old himself, slowly, inevitably. like a mountain aging beneath the sun. And through it all, the box waited, always, the night of realization. One winter in his 71st year, Akamori sat beside the pedestal, watching snow fall outside his chamber window. The palace was quiet. Even the guards' lanterns had grown dim. For the first time in decades, he felt no urgency, no longing, no ache for clarity. He had not become a monk. He had not become a scholar. He had not become a sage. He had simply lived. And in living, he had discovered something profound. The longing for meaning had softened. The fear of not knowing had faded. The ache for answers had dissolved into something gentle, like snow melting in warm hands. He gazed at the box and smiled softly. "Now," he whispered, "I am ready." His hands no longer trembled. His breath was steady. His heart was quiet. He untied the rope, lifted the lid, and looked inside. The box was empty. The laughter that filled the palace. At first the emperor felt only surprise, then confusion. Then something inside him broke open. Not with pain, but with relief so deep it struck him like light. He began to laugh. Softly at first, then fully, then uncontrollably. Tears streamed down his face. The servants outside his chamber exchanged confused looks. "Is His Majesty distressed?" one whispered. "No," said another quietly. "He sounds free." Inside, the emperor pressed the empty box to his chest. For decades, he had sought a truth that could fill the emptiness inside him. And now, finally, he understood. The emptiness was the truth. The emptiness had always been the truth. The awareness that recognized emptiness. The consciousness that longed, questioned, wondered. That was the very thing he had been searching for. He had been the seeker and the sought, the question and the answer, the emptiness and the fullness, all along. The wisdom of nothingness, 70% original concept with 30% expansion. The next morning, Akamori stepped onto the palace balcony with a lightness that surprised the ministers gathered below. His eyes shone not with authority, but with the quiet brilliance of someone who had awakened from a long sleep. He spoke to them gently. "The treasure I sought was not hidden in mountains or scriptures. It was here, in the awareness that experiences each moment. I spent decades searching for truth in the world, only to discover that truth lives in the one who searches." The ministers fell silent. Some understood immediately, some understood only later, some never understood at all. But Akamori did not mind. Truth did not need to be believed to be real. The emperor's final teaching, 30% creative extension. As Akamori grew older, he began meeting privately with young seekers. Monks, scholars, travelers, anyone who felt the same restless longing he once carried. To each one he showed the empty box. Some gasped, some cried, some laughed just as he had, some simply frowned in confusion. But to each one he said, "Do not seek outside what lives within. The meaning of life is not found through attainment, but through recognition." Once a young monk asked, "But Majesty, what if I do not understand yet?" Akamori placed the empty vessel into the monk's hands. "Then let the not understanding be your path. The seed of truth grows in the soil of not knowing. Do not rush it." This became known throughout the kingdom as the teaching of the quiet vessel, passed from teacher to student, from parent to child, from friend to friend for generations. A message for you tonight. Now, dear listener, rest softly, because this story is not truly about an emperor or a wooden box. It is about you. It is about the empty spaces inside you that you long to fill, the longing to understand your purpose, the longing to feel whole, the longing to find peace, certainty, clarity, direction. But tonight, in this quiet moment, let the emperor's discovery speak gently to you. You are not incomplete. You are not missing anything. You are searching for what has never been lost. The empty vessel represents the freedom that comes when you stop insisting life must reveal its meaning on your schedule. When you stop demanding answers and let questions breathe. When you stop clutching for certainty and allow confusion to soften. When you allow emptiness to feel spacious instead of frightening. Your awareness, on the one listening right now, is the truth you seek. Not the stories it tells, not the thoughts it thinks, not the experiences it collects, but the simple sense of being, of witnessing, of knowing I am. That is enough. That has always been enough. The emperor's vessel was empty because nothing needed to be added. Just as your awareness is complete because nothing can be taken away, take one slow breath in and let it ease out. Feel the quiet spaciousness inside your chest, the soft expansion that comes not from answers but from release. If you feel confusion, let it stay. If you feel uncertainty, let it breathe. If you feel longing, let it rest beside you like a friend. Everything is allowed here. Everything belongs. You are enough even in your not knowing, especially in your not knowing. Tonight, may the story of Emperor Akamori remind you gently, you are already whole. Awareness is already complete. Nothing is missing. Nothing has ever been missing. And when you're ready, we will move quietly onward into Chapter 2, Part 3, where the teaching deepens into the nature of emptiness, insight, and the quiet recognition that you have always been home. The moon drifted slowly across the high mountain sky, casting soft silver light over the quiet temple where you now rest. The stories of the emperor and the bamboo fields have already begun to settle into your awareness, not as lessons to memorize, but as gentle invitations to soften into yourself. Outside, the wind carried a faint scent of pine and cold stone. Inside, the meditation hall glowed with warm lantern light, steady as the breath inside your chest. And as the stillness deepened, the path into the second chapter opened yet again, leading us into the world of a scholar whose pursuit of knowledge took him everywhere except the one place he most needed to look. His name was Master Keitaro, one of the most respected intellectuals in the entire Eastern Province. This is his story. A story about searching the world for answers only to discover that silence had been waiting patiently within him all along. The scholar of 10,000 pages. In a mountain village famous for its libraries and monastic schools, Keitaro lived in a modest home overflowing with books. Shelves lined every wall. Scrolls filled every drawer. Manuscripts lay stacked in gentle, precarious towers around his study. For Keitaro, knowledge was not a hobby. It was a hunger, a longing, a craving that consumed him. He studied from dawn until long past dusk. He mastered ancient languages so he could read scriptures in their original forms. He traveled to distant monasteries to debate philosophy with their most advanced scholars. He memorized teachings, recited sutras, analyzed doctrines, and annotated commentaries until his eyes burned with exhaustion. Students from across the province sought him out, believing he had attained an unparalleled understanding of the path to enlightenment. And yet, Keitaro felt empty. Not the peaceful emptiness of the emperors discover, but the sharp, aching emptiness of someone who has gathered seashells by the shore yet still longs for the ocean. He could interpret any passage. He could lecture on any topic. He could quote masters from memory. But when he sat alone in his meditation room, the truth felt distant, silent, hidden, as if the more words he gathered, the further he drifted from the meaning behind them. The legend of the Perfect Sutra. One winter evening, as lanterns flickered against the rice paper walls of a monastery in the valley, Keitaro overheard two monks whispering about an ancient legend. There exists a sutra, one said, called the Scroll of Clear Seeing. And they say, the other replied, that whoever reads it attains immediate enlightenment. Keitaro froze. A sutra that contains ultimate truth, a teaching beyond all others, a text that completes understanding. His mind raced. He approached the monks immediately. "Where is this sutra?" he asked. The monks exchanged uneasy glances. "It is said to be kept in the Cloud Monastery," one whispered, "high in the northern peaks. Few have traveled there, even fewer have returned." Keitaro felt electricity rush through his body. At last, the final key, the missing piece, the teaching that would bring his decades of study into perfect completion. He packed a bag that night. By dawn, he was already halfway up the mountain path. The journey into cold and silence, the journey to the northern peaks was harsh. Snowdrifts towered as tall as houses. Winds whipped across the narrow trails like invisible claws. Keitaro slipped more than once on icy ledges, catching himself only by gripping jagged stones. But the hardship only strengthened his determination. "I will reach the monastery," he whispered into the wind. I will read the sutra. I will understand the truth. After 3 days, his clothes were torn, his fingers numb, his breath thin in the freezing air. But on the 4th day, just as the sun rose behind the peaks like molten gold, Keitaro saw it. A monastery carved directly into the mountain face, its doors ancient and wooden, its walls etched with faded characters that spoke of centuries of silence. Keitaro's heart pounded. At last, the Monastery of Clouds. Inside the monastery was surprisingly warm. 3 monks greeted him with calm expressions and deep bows. Their robes were worn but beautifully maintained, their eyes clear, unburdened. I am Keitaro, he announced. I have come to study the scroll of clear seeing. The monks exchanged soft smiles. We know, one of them said. Many who arrive here come for that reason. Keitaro's pulse quickened. So the sutra exists? It exists, the monk said, but it cannot be read by everyone. I am prepared, Keitaro insisted. I have studied for decades. I have mastered countless texts. I am ready. The monks bowed again. Then stay with us, they said. Train, serve, listen. And when you are ready, we will bring you to the sutra. Keitaro sighed impatiently, but he agreed. A month of quiet confusion. The monastery's days were simple. Morning meditation, communal meals, work in the gardens, copying old manuscripts, sweeping snow from pathways, evening chanting. Life moved slowly here, rhythmically like breath. Keitaro participated in the tasks, but his mind was not present. Each moment he wondered, why am I sweeping floors? Why must I wait? Why do they withhold the sutra? He performed each task with diligence, but not with peace. Each night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I did not come here to serve, he whispered. I came here to learn. Yet with each passing day, the monks seemed in no hurry to grant him access to the sacred sutra. Weeks passed, but gradually, something unexpected began to shift inside Keitaro. He noticed that when he swept the floors while paying attention to the movement of his hands, his breath deepened. He noticed that when he ate slowly, the taste of simple vegetables felt oddly delightful. He noticed that when he copied manuscripts, the meaning of the texts began to feel less like information and more like music. And during long, silent meditations, something inside him, something subtle, began to soften. It was as if each day brushed away one layer of dust from his mind. Still, he said nothing aloud. He waited. The chamber of the final sutra. On the morning of the 31st day, the head monk approached him. Keitaro, he said gently, it is time. Keitaro stood so quickly he nearly lost his balance. They led him through a corridor he had never seen before, to a small wooden door carved with swirling patterns of clouds. Behind it lay a chamber lit by a single lantern. In the center sat a wooden table, and on the table rested a box, dark lacquer, elegant, untouched by time. Keitaro approached it with trembling hands. This is the scroll of clear seeing, the head monk said. Keitaro bowed deeply. He lifted the lid. Inside lay a rolled scroll wrapped in silk. Hands shaking, breath unsteady, he unwrapped it and unrolled it carefully. His eyes scanned the parchment. Then he froze, because the scroll was blank. Completely blank. Not a single word, not a single mark, not a single brushstroke. Nothing. The silence that reveals. Keitaro stared at the empty scroll. His jaw tightened. His heart pounded. His chest ached with something deeper than disappointment. He whispered, barely audible, there must be a mistake. But the monks remained still. There is no mistake, the head monk said. And this is the Sutra of Clear Seeing. Keitaro felt anger rising. All my life I studied, he snapped. All my life I sought. All my life I climbed toward this, and now you show me nothing? You call this truth? The head monk stepped forward. Keitaro, you have studied the words of others for so long that you have forgotten to study yourself. He placed a gentle hand on the scholar's shoulder. This scroll is not blank, it is a mirror. Everything you bring to it, your longing, your doubt, your restlessness, is reflected back. Keitaro swallowed hard. The monk continued. For years you have believed truth was something hidden in pages, but truth is not something you read. Truth is something you recognize. Keitaro's breath trembled. But I don't understand. The monk's smile was soft. You will, not today, not by force, but in the quiet that follows your surrender. The realization begins. 30% creative extension. That night, Keitaro sat alone in the chamber, the blank scroll unrolled in front of him. There were no instructions, no teachings, no concepts to memorize, just silence. He found his breath slowing, his shoulders dropping, his heart calming. The emptiness did not mock him, it welcomed him. He realized with a shock that for the first time in years there was no pressure to understand anything. No text demanding interpretation, no doctrine requiring mastery, no philosophy to debate, no teacher to impress. Only awareness, simple, quiet, present. He had always feared emptiness, yet now it felt spacious. A refuge, he whispered into the stillness. This is the teaching, not because the scroll offered information, but because it removed the belief that he needed more information to be complete. Keitaro felt tears slide down his cheeks. Not tears of sadness, not frustration, but relief. A long overdue exhale from the depths of his being. Returning to the world with new eyes, Keitaro remained in the monastery for several more weeks. Not because he was required to, but because he wanted to. He copied fewer texts, he swept more floors, he took longer walks. He listened more deeply, he spoke more slowly. When he finally descended the mountain, he carried no scrolls, no books, no new doctrines. Only the memory of the blank sutra and something else. A quiet knowing that the truth he had sought for decades was already alive within him. When he returned to his village, students gathered quickly, eager to hear the new teachings he had brought back. Keitaro sat before them, calm and unhurried. "What did you discover?" they asked. He lifted an empty piece of parchment. "This," he said softly, "is the greatest teaching I have encountered." The students leaned forward. "But there is nothing on it," one said. Keitaro smiled. "Exactly. A teaching for you tonight. Now, as you listen to this story, as your breath grows softer, as your body sinks deeper into rest, let Keitaro's realization reach gently toward you. There may be parts of your life where you believe you need more. More answers, more clarity, more certainty, more knowledge, more evidence, more improvement. But here, in this quiet moment, consider the possibility that what you truly need is not more, but less. Less pressure to understand. Less expectation to figure everything out. Less comparison, less striving, less noise. Sometimes clarity emerges not from adding more teachings, but from letting go of the belief that you must earn understanding. Sometimes the most profound transformation comes not from gaining, but from releasing. Take a slow breath and feel the spaciousness within you, the unfurnished room where awareness lives. It does not need decoration. It does not need explanation. It does not need more words. It only needs your presence. Tonight, let the blank scroll rest in your heart. Let silence teach you gently. Let not knowing be a doorway, not a burden. And when you're ready, we will move on to Chapter 3, where the stories deepen into the nature of emotional weather, the acceptance of change, and the freedom that comes when you allow life to unfold without resistance. But for now, rest. You have heard enough. You have learned enough. You have become enough. Let the quiet unfold within you like a soft dawn. A gentle hush settled across the mountain temple as the second chapter of our journey came to rest within you. The lanterns along the meditation hall flickered softly, their light weaving golden threads across the wooden floor. Outside, night settled deeper into the valley, bringing with it a vast and tender stillness. You remain here in this sanctuary of breath and story, allowing the lessons to sink beneath your awareness, like seeds carried slowly downward through warm, dark soil. And now, as your body softens further into rest, we step quietly into Chapter 3, where the landscape shifts from mountains and temples to the inner terrain of the human heart. This chapter is not about the search for truth or the release of effort or the patience of unseen growth. This chapter is about weather, the weather within you. For just as seasons unfold across the natural world, so too do seasons unfold in your emotional life. And our first story begins in a remote northern monastery, perched among windswept cliffs and ancient pines, where a young monk named Satoru struggled with a storm he could not escape, because the storm lived inside him. the monk who feared his own sadness. Satoru had lived in the monastery for 3 years, yet he still felt like a visitor in his own mind. He worked diligently, studied sincerely, meditated with discipline, but there was one thing he could not control. He suffered from sudden heavy periods of melancholy, not grief, not despair, not depression in a clinical sense, just a deep sadness. It would descend without warning, like a cold fog rolling in from the sea, like winter arriving too early. And when it came, Satoru felt as though an invisible weight pressed against his chest. His breath grew shallow, his thoughts darkened. Simple tasks felt overwhelming. Colors lost their brightness. Sounds became distant and dulled. He hid this from the other monks, fearing it made him flawed, weak, unsuited for the spiritual path. He believed monks were meant to be calm at all times, serene, peaceful, untouched by emotional storms. But Satoru felt broken. When the melancholy came, he berated himself. What is wrong with me? Why can't I be like the others? Why do these heavy feelings return? Why can't I stop them? He tried fighting the sadness. He tried forcing himself to appear cheerful. He tried meditating harder, working longer, praying more intensely. But the more he resisted the sadness, the stronger it seemed to grow. And each time it returned, Satoru feared it might never leave. The winter morning. One morning, after a night of restless dreams, Satoru woke to a world transformed. Snow had fallen heavily in the night, blanketing the monastery grounds in a thick layer of white. The pine trees bowed under its weight. The courtyard glistened like a field of stars. Satoru wrapped his robe tightly around himself and stepped outside. The air was cold enough to sting his lungs. His breath rose as white mist. He felt the familiar heaviness inside him. A quiet ache, a shadow beneath the ribs. He lowered his head and began sweeping the snow, tears stinging his eyes. Not from sadness alone, but from exhaustion. He was tired of battling his own heart. That was when he saw Master Daishin sitting on a nearby bench, watching the snow fall with a serene expression. Daishin was the monastery's elder, a man so gentle that even birds seemed to trust him. He had lived more winters than any monk could remember, and his wisdom was sought by many. Satoru bowed deeply, trying to hide the tremble in his voice. "Good morning, Master." The old man smiled warmly. "Satoru, come sit with me. Let us watch the snow together." Satoru hesitated. "But Master, I must finish sweeping." "A winter," Daishin interrupted softly, "so is not in a hurry. Why should you be?" Satoru reluctantly sat beside him. For several minutes they watched snow drift from the branches, falling in soft spirals that made everything appear slow, suspended, dreamlike. Daishin finally spoke. "Satoru, your heart is troubled." The young monk stared at the ground. "Yes, Master, but I did not want to burden you with it." Daishin chuckled gently. "Snow does not burden the earth. Why should your sadness burden me?" Satoru's throat tightened. He whispered, "I fear something is wrong with me. These feelings, this sadness, it comes like winter storms. I try to push it away, to fight it, to overcome it, but I cannot. I fear it will consume me someday." Daishin turned to him, eyes soft as falling snow. "Satoru, do you think winter is a mistake?" The young monk blinked, confused. "No, Master. Do you think winter is a failure of the earth? Of course not. Do you believe winter should be replaced with endless summer?" Satoru shook his head. "Well then," Daishin said gently, "why do you fear the winter within your own heart?" Understanding inner seasons. Satoru stared at him, stunned. Daishin continued, "You have believed that sadness means something is wrong. But sadness is not a flaw. It is a season." He brushed snow from the bench beside him. "Just as the earth needs winter, time for roots to deepen, for the land to rest, for old growth to quietly fade, so too does your heart need its winters." Satoru listened, breath trembling. Daishin then pointed toward the trees. "Look at the pines. They do not beg for summer when snow weighs them down. They do not curse the cold. They simply accept the season, and in doing so, they survive it." He placed a hand on Satoru's shoulder. "Your sadness is not meant to be fought. It is meant to be honored." Satoru felt something crack inside him. not in a painful way, but like ice breaking under the first warmth of spring. He whispered, "But master, in being sad feels wrong, it feels like failure." Daishin shook his head. "Sadness is not failure, resistance is. The teaching of the frozen lake, 70% original concept plus 30% new." Daishin beckoned for Satoru to follow him. They walked across the courtyard and into the forest behind the monastery, where a lake lay frozen beneath the winter sky. The surface shone like glass, reflecting the pale sun. Daishin stepped to the lake's edge. "Look at the ice," he said. Satoru gazed at the frozen expanse. "What do you see?" Daishin asked. "I see stillness," Satoru whispered. "Yes," Daishin replied, "but beneath this stillness the water continues to move, slowly, quietly, hidden from sight." He touched the cold surface with his fingertips. "Your sadness is like this ice. It appears heavy and unmoving, but beneath it your heart continues to flow." Satoru swallowed hard. You mean my sadness does not stop my growth?" Daishin smiled. "Nothing stops your growth, not truly, not ever." He then picked up a small stone and placed it gently on the ice. "Many people," he said, "try to break the ice with force." He knocked lightly on the frozen surface. It responded with a faint, hollow echo. "But breaking the ice is not the way of nature." He looked up toward the sun. Sooner or later warmth arrives, not from effort, not from struggle, but from the simple passing of time." Satoru watched as the sunlight glowed faintly on the ice. Daishin stood. "Even when winter comes to your heart, Satoru, remember this. You cannot force the ice to melt. You can only wait for spring." The month of learning to winter. Over the following weeks, Satoru tried something new, perhaps the most radical practice he had ever attempted. He stopped fighting his sadness. When heaviness came, he didn't tighten against it. He didn't try to escape it. He didn't punish himself. Instead, following Daishin's guidance, he whispered to himself, "This is my winter, let me rest." He spent more time walking slowly through the forest, more time reading poems, more time sitting beside the frozen lake, listening to the quiet beneath the silence. He found that when he didn't resist sadness, it no longer swallowed him. It no longer consumed him. It no longer frightened him. Some days he still felt heavy, but the heaviness felt natural, like clouds gathering before rain. Some days he felt light, and he welcomed that too. He began to see his emotional life as a vast landscape of seasons. Spring mornings of new beginnings, summer afternoons of joy, autumn evenings of letting go, winter nights of rest. And slowly, very slowly, peace began to bloom again inside him. Not because sadness vanished, but because he no longer needed it to vanish. The unexpected spring, 30% new creative extension. One dawn, as Satoru approached the lake, he noticed something different. The ice was thinning. Tiny cracks shimmered like silver lines. A faint whisper of water could be heard beneath the surface. He knelt, listening. Daishin stepped quietly beside him. "Do you hear it?" the old master asked. "Yes," Satoru whispered. "Then the thaw." Daishin smiled. "When winter has done its work," he said, "spring comes on its own." Satoru stared at the lake, eyes soft with awe. "Oi, master," he said quietly. "I think I understand now. My sadness was not a punishment." "No," Daishin said, "and it was a season." "Yes." "And seasons pass." "Yes." Satoru closed his eyes, breathing softly. "But master," he continued, "and what about the next time sadness returns?" Daishin placed a warm hand on his shoulder. "Then you will know how to welcome it. A teaching for you, the listener. And now, dear traveler of this quiet night, let Satoru's story settle gently into your own heart. Because just like him, you too have seasons within you. Times of energy and clarity. Times of rest and withdrawal. Times of joy and expansion. Times of sadness and contraction. And none of these are mistakes. There is no emotion you should not feel. There is no mood that makes you flawed. There is no sadness that means you are broken. There is no heaviness that means you are failing. Everything inside you has a season. Everything belongs. So tonight, as your body softens, as your breath becomes slower and deeper, let these truths wash over you like warm light. You are allowed to have winters. You are allowed to feel heavy. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be human. Sadness is not the enemy. Resistance is. And when you stop resisting, when you offer yourself the same grace the earth offers itself, everything begins to thaw in its own perfect time. Take one slow breath now, and exhale gently. Feel the soft winter inside you, not as a burden, but as a season of necessary stillness. Let your inner landscape rest. Let your awareness fall quiet. Let the ice melt slowly, softly, without force, without urgency, exactly as nature intended. And when you're ready, we will continue into Chapter 3, Part 2, where the next story reveals how acceptance transforms not just sadness, but every storm that life brings. For now, rest in the winter within you. It is here to help you grow. The monastery grounds lay quiet as dawn began to wash the sky with muted shades of silver blue. A thin layer of frost shimmered across the stones, glowing softly under the early morning light. Inside the meditation hall, you rest in a warm cocoon of stillness as the final chapter of our journey deepens. The story of Satoru and his inner winter has settled gently inside you. An invitation to honor your inner seasons, to soften toward yourself, to allow the heart to ebb and flow. But now the path opens into another story, one that teaches not about the gentle arrival of sadness, but about the storms of life. Those moments when everything feels chaotic, unpredictable, overwhelming. Tonight we travel to a quiet valley beyond the mountains, where a farmer named Ichiru learned a lesson as old as the earth itself. That acceptance is not giving up. It is learning how to stand with life as it is. The farmer who fought the sky. Ichiru had lived on his land for nearly 15 years. He knew the smell of rain, the sound of soil drying, the weight of harvests, both good and bad. His hands were weathered, his eyes lined gently from squinting at sunlight and laughter alike. He was a good farmer, hard-working, thoughtful, devoted to his family and his fields. But Ichiru had one flaw, one quiet source of suffering that few knew. He believed weather should obey him. When rain came too early, he grew anxious. When storms came too hard, he grew furious. When drought lingered too long, he cursed the sky. He felt responsible not only for his work, but for the climate itself. If the wind was too strong, he took it personally. If the river overflowed, he took it as an attack. If a frost came late in spring, he felt it was a punishment. Ichiru did not fear hardship. He feared lack of control. And life, sensing this weakness, seemed to send him every challenge imaginable. A season of relentless storms. One year, the valley experienced an unusual cycle of storms. Rain fell endlessly, turning roads to mud and fields to shallow lakes. Thunder growled across the horizon for days at a time. Lightning cracked like splitting wood. Ichiru's crops, his entire livelihood, were at risk. He ran from field to field in panic, trying to build trenches, divert water, cover seedlings with makeshift shelters. His clothes were soaked daily. His boots sank into mud as though the earth itself wanted to swallow him whole. Each night he collapsed into bed, feeling crushed under the weight of fear and anger. "It's unfair," he muttered bitterly. "Why this storm? Why my land? Why now?" His wife, gentle Hana, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Storms come to everyone," she whispered. But Ichiru shook his head. "No, not like this, not so much, not all at once." And so the storm outside continued. But the storm inside him grew louder. The day he collapsed. One afternoon, as thunder rolled across the valley, Ichiru stood in his largest field, drenched beneath the unrelenting rain. He tried digging a channel to save the barley roots from drowning, but the mud filled in as quickly as he shoveled. His arms burned. His breath came in short gasps. His heart pounded. He kept going and going and going, until his body finally refused. His shovel slipped from numb hands, his knees buckled, and he fell into the mud with a heavy thud. Rain hammered his back, his chest tightened. He felt helpless, defeated, swallowed alive by forces far beyond him. "Why, won't it stop?" he whispered into the earth. He did not know how long he lay there. When he finally opened his eyes, the storm had eased to a drizzle. The sky was a soft gray instead of raging black. And beside him stood his elderly neighbor, Master Ryusei, a retired fisherman known for his calm presence and unhurried wisdom. Ryusei had lived through storms stronger than any Ichiru could imagine. Storms that shattered boats, storms that stole livelihoods, storms that taught him truths that could not be learned from books. He looked down at Ichiru with compassionate eyes. "You're fighting the sky," Ryusei said softly, "and the sky will always win." Ichiru closed his eyes, tears mixing with rainwater. "What else can I do?" he whispered. "If I don't fight, everything will be lost." Ryusei knelt beside him. "No," he said gently. "If you don't fight, you will see clearly." The elder's story. Ryusei helped the exhausted farmer to his feet, guiding him beneath a tall pine tree for shelter. They sat on damp roots as rain softened around them. "Ichiro," the elder began, "when I was a young man, I faced a storm at sea so fierce that it tore the mast from our boat and nearly flipped us into the waves. I screamed at the ocean, I cursed the sky, I fought with all my strength." He paused, closing his eyes with memory. "But the ocean is older than you and me. It cannot be fought, only respected." Ichiru listened, breath still unsteady. Ryusei continued, "I used to believe that controlling the weather was the key to survival. But the truth is simpler. Survival comes from adapting, not resisting. From accepting what is, not demanding what should be." Ichiru frowned. "Accepting the storm won't save my crops," he said bitterly. Ryusei nodded. "No, but resisting it will break you long before it breaks your crops." Ichiru swallowed. "What am I supposed to do then?" The elder smiled softly. "Stop trying to defeat the storm. Learn to work with it." The 3 questions. Ryusei placed a hand over his own heart. "There are 3 questions I ask myself when life becomes a storm." Ichiru listened, his breath slowing as curiosity softened his fear. "First, is this within my control? If yes, I act. If no, I release." He raised one finger. "Second, is my resistance helping or hurting me?" Another finger. "Third, what is the most compassionate way to respond to the situation and to myself?" He lowered his hand. "These 3 questions saved my life more times than I can count." Ichiru stared at the rain-soaked ground between them. His voice was barely a whisper. I've been fighting everything." Ryusei nodded gently. "Yes, you have been fighting the sky, the earth, the season, and most of all, your own fear." He leaned back, listening to the soft patter of rain on pine needles. "But storms are not stopped by force. They are endured by acceptance." The farmer learns to bend. The next day, Ichiru did not rush outside with frantic energy. He walked the fields slowly. He breathed deeply. He let the sky be gray without arguing with it. He accepted the storm instead of cursing it. And acceptance changed everything. Not the storm itself, but Ichiru's relationship to it. He realized he could build better drainage channels during calm hours. He could cover the most fragile crops with tarp. He could move vulnerable seedlings indoors. He could temporarily shift his planting schedule. He could adjust instead of resist. He could bend like bamboo in the wind. He began tending his crops with gentleness instead of panic. He worked with the weather, not against it. He planned instead of reacting. He breathed instead of fighting. And something remarkable happened. Even though the storms continued, Ichiru no longer collapsed from fear. Even though conditions remained harsh, he found peace inside the chaos. Even though he had less control over nature, he had more control over himself. The storm breaks and so does something else. Weeks later, when the storms finally eased and sunlight returned to the valley, Ichiru walked through his fields with a sense of awe. Many of his crops survived, some were damaged, some had to be replanted. But his heart, for the first time, felt steady, no longer held hostage by fear, no longer in a battle with the sky. Ryusei visited him that morning leaning on his walking stick. "You weathered it well?" the elder said, examining the fields. Ichiru bowed deeply. "It's because I stopped fighting." Ryusei smiled with pride. "Good, because storms will come again." Ichiru nodded. "I know, but I also know that storms pass." He placed a hand on the damp soil, feeling its resilience beneath his palm. "And so do fear," he whispered. The story within the story, 30% new creative expansion. That night, as Ichiru and Hana shared tea by the fire, she asked softly, What changed you? Ichiru stared into the flames, listening to the crackle of burning cedar. I finally understood, he said slowly, that the sky never meant to hurt me. I was hurting myself by resisting what was already happening. He took her hand. I wanted life to follow my plan, but life has its own seasons. Hana smiled. You sound like one of the old monks. Ichiru laughed quietly. Maybe storms are better teachers than people. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Then you learned well. He squeezed her hand. I learned that acceptance doesn't mean liking the storm. It means standing steady within it. A teaching for you, dear listener. And now, as you lie here breathing softly into the quiet of the night, let Ichiru's story settle gently into your awareness. Because you too have faced storms. Emotional storms, life storms, storms of uncertainty, storms of fear. Storms you tried to fight, storms you tried to control, storms you wished would disappear. But hear this truth whispered gently. Storms are not stopped by resistance. Storms soften when you stop arguing with the sky. Take a slow breath in and exhale softly. Let these truths wash over you. You do not need to control everything. You do not need to prevent every loss. You do not need to carry fear like armor. You do not need to fight life. You do not need to withstand the storm alone. Tonight, let yourself be like the bamboo, rooted yet flexible, grounded yet yielding, strong because you can bend. Let the parts of life you cannot control be exactly what they are. Let the storms be storms. Let the seasons change. Let your breath be soft again. Let acceptance rise within you, not as surrender but as strength. Because acceptance is not the absence of action. It is the absence of war with reality. It is the quiet recognition. This is what is happening. I can meet it with compassion. Tonight, allow your inner winds to calm. Allow your inner storms to soften. Allow yourself to rest. You are learning to bend. You are learning to breathe. You are learning to stand with life as it unfolds. And when you're ready, we will move into Chapter 3, Part 3, where the final story awaits. A story about returning home to yourself, about remembering your true nature, and about discovering that beneath every storm, beneath every season, beneath every change, there is a sky that has always been clear. Night settled gently across the mountains like a soft blanket drawn over the world. The meditation hall dimmed into a golden hush, its lanterns flickering like small suns suspended in stillness. Outside, the wind quieted. The trees stopped swaying. Even the distant river seemed to soften its voice, as if it too sensed that the final chapter of a long journey was unfolding. You lie here, breathing softly into the warm cradle of the present moment, having followed stories of struggle, patience, acceptance, and quiet transformation. Now, as we enter the final part of our journey together, the path turns inward, toward the oldest wisdom of all, that beneath every season, beneath every storm, beneath every thought and feeling is a sky that has always been clear. Our last story begins not in a village or a monastery, but in a small traveling caravan winding its way through the misty foothills of the eastern range. In that caravan was a young woman named Miyu, a storyteller, a wanderer, and a seeker of truth she could feel but could never fully describe. This is her story, and through it perhaps you will remember something ancient within yourself. The storyteller who carried too many voices. Miyu had traveled for years from village to village, telling stories to earn her meals. Some tales she inherited from her mother, others she collected from strangers. Still others she invented under starlit skies when loneliness weighed on her too heavily. Her stories brought comfort to others, but her own heart was full of confusion. She carried too many voices inside her. The voice of doubt, you are not enough. The voice of fear, what if you never find your place? The voice of comparison, others know their path, why don't you? The voice of regret, you should have been further by now. The voice of longing, there must be more, somewhere. These voices grew louder each year until Miyu felt like a vessel overflowing with noise. She was beloved everywhere she went, yet she felt deeply lost inside. The more she tried to quiet the voices, the louder they echoed in her chest. The more she tried to find her purpose, the more it seemed to slip away. One evening, after performing stories for a small riverside village, Miyu lay awake in her caravan feeling utterly defeated. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered into the darkness, "I tell stories that guide others home, but why can't I find home myself?" And though her question dissolved into the night, something, or someone, was listening. The old monk by the river. The next morning, as mist curled over the riverbank, Miyu sat on a fallen log with her head in her hands. She barely noticed the old monk who approached quietly, leaning on a wooden staff smoothed by many years of use. He sat beside her without a word. For a long while, they simply watched the river flow. Finally, Miyu whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." The monk nodded softly, his eyes following the drifting leaves on the water. "That is a good thing," he said. Miyu frowned through her tears. "How can that possibly be good?" The monk smiled gently. "Because when you no longer know who you are finally free to discover who you've always been." "Shayim," she shook her head. "I'm lost. There's noise in me that won't stop, voices saying I'm behind, that I'm not enough, that I'm failing." The monk turned toward her. The weather." "The weather?" she repeated. "Yes," he said, gesturing toward her heart. "The weather inside you." Miyu blinked. He continued. "The mind has storms, the heart has seasons, but beneath all of it, the sky remains clear." Miyu felt confusion tighten her chest. "I don't understand." The monk tapped his wooden staff against the ground. "Walk with me," he said. "The hill of shifting skies." They walked together up a small hill overlooking the valley. The sky above them was gray, heavy with clouds. The wind tugged at Miyu's clothing as if urging her to pay attention. "Tell me," the monk said, "and what is the weather today?" Miyu looked upward. "Cloudy, windy, uneasy." "And does this weather frighten you?" "No," she replied. "It's only weather." The monk nodded. "Now tell me, when the wind blows, does the sky disappear?" "Of course not." "When the clouds gather, does the sky vanish?" "No." "And when storms shake the valley, does the sky cease to exist beneath them?" Miyu thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, the sky is always there." The monk smiled. "And so it is with you." Miyu's breath caught in her throat. He continued gently. "Your thoughts are clouds. Your emotions are winds. Your doubts are storms. Your fears are rain." He placed a hand over her heart. "But beneath all of them is a sky, vast, unchanging, clear." Miyu looked at him, eyes widening with dawning comprehension. "You mean, who I really am isn't the storms?" "No," he said lovingly. "Who you really are is the sky. The clouds that mistook themselves for the sky." They sat on the hill as the wind rustled the tall grass around them. Miyu spoke softly. "I've spent years believing my thoughts defined me, that my doubts were me, that my sadness was who I was, that my fear meant something was wrong." The monk nodded. "That is because the clouds convinced themselves they were the sky." He lifted a small leaf from the ground and let it go. The wind carried it away. "Clouds come and go, storms rise and fall, winds roar and soften, but the sky remains." Miyu let these words settle. "And how," she asked softly, "do I return to the sky?" The monk closed his eyes and inhaled slowly. "By doing nothing." "Nothing?" "Nothing," he repeated. "You stop trying to fix the weather. You stop identifying with every gust of wind. You stop believing every thought. You stop resisting every feeling." He opened his eyes and smiled. "And slowly, slowly, the sky reveals itself. The night of quiet recognition, 70% original plus 30% creative." That night, Miyu sat beside the river again, listening to the murmuring water. She closed her eyes and breathed gently. A wave of sadness rose inside her. Not overwhelming, but present. Normally, she would tense. She would push it away. She would ask, "What's wrong with me?" She would try to understand, fix, solve. But tonight she remembered the monk's words. So she allowed the sadness to be there. She didn't cling to it. She didn't resist it. She simply watched it, like a cloud drifting across the sky. Then a thought appeared. "I am behind in life." Another thought. "Others have found their purpose. You haven't." Normally, these thoughts would pull her into a downward spiral. But tonight, she did not identify with them. She let them pass. Another thought emerged. You're pretending to be strong, but you're weak. She breathed. Let it float. Let it dissolve. Then something surprising happened. Her breath deepened on its own. Something inside her softened. She felt the first glimpse of the sky beneath the weather. She whispered into the dark, I'm not the storm. A shiver moved through her chest, not of fear but of recognition. The monk's departure. The next morning, Miyu rushed to find the old monk, but he was already preparing to leave, fastening small bags to his donkey's saddle. You're leaving? She asked, surprised. He smiled softly. My journey continues, and now yours does too. She bowed deeply. Thank you, she whispered, and for showing me the sky. The monk touched her shoulder. I showed you nothing. I merely pointed to what you already knew. He stepped back, looking at her with warm, steady eyes. You will forget this truth, he said, many times, but do not worry. The sky does not vanish just because you lose sight of it. The words touched something tender within her. Before leaving, he handed her a small object wrapped in cloth. A gift, he said. When she opened it, she found a small piece of glass polished smooth. It is a mirror, the monk said, but not for your face. She looked at him. It is for when you forget who you are, he said softly. When storms come, hold it up to the sky. It will remind you that the sky remains clear, even when you cannot see it. He bowed. Then he and his donkey departed down the misty road, disappearing into morning light. The journey home. In the following weeks, Miyu traveled onward, but everything felt different. Not because her circumstances changed, but because her relationship to them did. When loneliness visited her at night, she let it pass. When doubt whispered in her mind, she let it drift. When fear pulled at her chest, she breathed through it gently. She stopped trying to fix herself. She stopped trying to force clarity. She stopped trying to chase purpose. Instead, she observed. She listened. She waited. Sometimes the sky was clear. Sometimes it wasn't. But even in the darkest weather, she remembered. The sky remains. The return to the village of her childhood. 30% new creative expansion. Months later, Miyu returned to the village where she had grown up. The path was lined with cherry blossoms just beginning to open, pale pink petals trembling in the breeze. Her old home was still there, a small wooden house beside a stream. She approached slowly, heart soft with emotion. Inside, everything was just as she remembered. Her mother's ink brush, her father's old fishing lantern, a cracked bowl she used to eat rice from as a child, and on the table, a small wooden box containing her mother's writings. Miyu opened it gently. Inside were dozens of tiny scraps of parchment, each containing a single sentence. Her mother had written one each morning before meditation, a kind of private wisdom journal. Miyu read them slowly. When sadness visits, offer it tea. A cloudy mind is still a sky. The heart is not broken, it is weathered. Your true home is your awareness. No feeling is permanent. Rest when you need rest. He breathed gently into the storm. She felt her throat tighten as realization washed through her. Her mother had known the teaching all along, and now she understood it too. A teaching for you, the listener. Now, dear traveler of this quiet night, let Miyu's journey reach into your own heart. Because you too have lived through storms. You too have believed your thoughts were the sky. You too have mistaken weather for identity. But hear this gently. You are not your sadness. You are not your fear. You are not your doubt. You are not your confusion. You are not your past. You are not your storms. You are the awareness that witnesses them. You are the sky, vast, clear, present, unchanged. Even when clouds gather, even when winds howl, even when storms rage, even when you feel lost, the sky remains. Allow these words to soften through you. You have never been broken. You have never been missing anything. You have never failed at being yourself. You have only forgotten the sky beneath the weather. Breathe now, slowly, gently, deeply. And with each exhale, let the storm settle. Let the clouds drift. Let the winds soften. Feel the vastness inside you, still clear, timeless. This is your true home. This is your deepest nature. This is what you return to again and again with every soft breath. The sky remains, always, Epilogue, a night that holds you. As our final story closes, as the lanterns dim in the meditation hall, as your body sinks deeper into rest, let everything you've heard become simple presence. Not thoughts, not analysis, not effort, just being. Being here, being enough, being the sky beneath every change. Breathe softly, rest deeply. Let night embrace you like a warm river of quiet. The journey is complete, but the peace it offers lives within you always. Good night, dear traveler. The sky remains.